your regular waste. So maybe every day on the farm you get a pile of farm waste like taro leaves or trimmings or whatever, and you throw it down in your crib. Maybe this is big, pretty big, depends on your pig production size, whatever. You throw it down in your crib, sprinkle with IMO, throw some fresh grass on. Leave it, and the next day you get another batch of, maybe you get your, maybe from the Kapuna dinner you bring all the food scraps, and that lays down a little bit of IMO, some grass clippings or something you have around, lay it down. So for 7 days you're layering just with whatever you get per day, because you don't get enough to fill the whole crib maybe in one day, but over a week you get enough to fill the crib with some of your grass and stuff. So you're layering just a tiny sprinkle of IMO every layer. You're layering it in, okay? And then you leave that sit now. Now you have 2 of these. The next one you start the next week. Layering whatever you get, farm waste, farm scraps, a little bit of chicken manure, whatever. And you're layering, just kind of like the chicken feed formulation, but it's more whatever you can get. But the IMO is necessary because you got to ferment it. So because pigs don't eat uncooked stuff sometimes, or you don't want them to have uncooked stuff and make them sick, right? Now, when you finish that second crib, it's been now a week that this has been fermented. You take your big shovel and you just chop off some lasagna. Maybe this is about a foot deep. You chop off a big block of the lasagna from that crib, chuck it to your pigs. That's their meal for the day, right? You need enough to feed them. Maybe you got to supplement with commercial feed. Maybe you throw some commercial feed in that while it's producing. But that lasagna goes to them. It's been fermented. You used a bunch of grass and stuff, but they're eating it all because it's mingled with all the stuff that was breaking down. And then by the time you're finished, one a day for a week feeding that, now this one's ready. You start feeding that, you start layering that up. So you might need 3, but you start feeding them the one that's been fermented for a week, 1 a day. And if you get enough kind of waste products coming in, you can feed pretty poor quality feed, meaning grasses and all this stuff, and still get great carcass and weight production. Well, I mean, because the main cost for pig farming is feed, right? So if you can cut this, maybe this is only 50% of your feed, but if you can cut your feed cost 50% as a pig farmer, that is cash in your pocket. And this is good for putting on carcass quality because it's a fermented feed. All right, that's the pig feed formulation. The main thing with pigs too is the preparing the pen, the no smell piggery. There's a video on YouTube, just my name, how to piggery, pig pen. I don't know what the video is called. But any questions on chickens and pigs, feed formulation, etc.?
Well, fly control.
If you are, if you have IMO going real well in there, and then you have just a bucket of IMO with a scoop, any place that they got, because often they're pooping in the same place, any place they got to build up, just chuck a thing of IMO each day, when you walk by, you're going to have a lot less flies. Very few flies if your system's working well. One of the main things is making sure they can't create a water wallow. So you got to create a basin with a drain that leads out of their piggery for any water that they can play with. Because if they make their ground wet, you're going to get flies. If you can keep it just the IMO and the wood chips and all that's going on in there, generally you're not going to have flies, or very few. Yeah, it's about their litter. If their litter's getting wet or building up, or it's too high density, you can run this at a pretty high density, but if it's over build up, you're not going to be able to stay on top of the flies. So yeah, but generally a natural farming no smell piggery is dry litter. You don't have any wet wallows happening, and so there's not as much fly. And then you're throwing IMO or wood chips on top of manure just so that it gets inoculated, because the microbes are going to break that down. You never remove poop from a natural farming piggery in the whole life of. So 10 years later, you've never removed poop, or you remove it if you want it for gardening. You take it out and you apply fresh wood chips, sometimes per batch. You know, if you run a whole batch to full size, then you take them out and you're like, oh, that's gold in there. It's all been fermented. It's got wood chips in it. I want it for growing my garden patch this year. You take it out, you put wood chips fresh. Yeah, it's pretty amazing if you've been around commercial piggeries to come around a natural farming piggery. Commercial piggery you can smell from a couple miles away. Natural farming piggery you can walk around in there and you feel like you can take your shoes off and be fine. Alright, no questions on any of that. I figured just an overview, kind of give you the concept if you want to play with it. There's a lot of room. Once you have the IMO to be able to ferment feeds and do composting, there's a lot of room to produce valuable products once you start understanding how these components, these dynamics work.